Welcome back, everybody. We're going to skip the intro and get straight into it because this time, episode 30, as I mentioned at the end of last time, we're just looking to make a sector today. This is going to be the second time that we've done kind of just a GM view of we're going to roll on tables, we're going to figure out what is coming up in this next sector. It's going to be much more low-key. I don't plan on doing anything from the point of view of any particular characters. And if I'm being honest, for me as a player right now, I could probably kind of use that tonight. Just no, it feels like less pressure when this happens. I can't guarantee it'll necessarily be the usual length of episode. We're just going to have to see how long this takes us. Oh, and for anybody curious, yeah, my elbow wound from the knife last night, it's fine. It's been healing up. You can definitely still see it, but it's doing all right. So anyway, why don't we start making this new sectors? Let me pull up our little tables. All right. So step one, as I follow along the guide, I'm just like last time, I'm doing this as if this is our starting sector in the game, which if you're running a game at home, FYI, you don't need to do this every time. This is probably more in-depth than you necessarily need for every single sector that you come into, but I find it very helpful. You might as well, to just have that same level of detail to what's coming up next. So if we follow along with that guide, step one, we need to determine, is this in the Terminus, the Outlands, the Expanse, or the Void? Now, there's no way it's in the Expanse or the Void. Just based on the story that we've told, we know one thing about this sector so far, and that's that it's going to house this, like, salvage yard, shipyard kind of place that will have the sort of engine that Emil's looking for. We know it'll have that. I don't feel like that's the sort of place that would exist in the as far out as the Expanse when it's that far flung. You know, as it's described in the book, only a few bold pioneers have delved these far-flung reaches. If you're ready to face the dangers of lonely exploration within uncharted space, start here. That just really doesn't sound like the type of place that would have that kind of settlement. Like that wouldn't be possible there. I could buy it as existing in the Outlands. You know, its recent expansion, settlements here are scattered, and navigational paths are often uncharted and perilous. If you're a spacer on the wild frontier, start here. That could make sense, but honestly, this could be the first place that makes sense as the terminus. You know, settlements are relatively common here, and spaceborne routes between communities are usually well charted. If you want to focus on interacting with other people in communities, start here. That makes a lot of sense to me as far as a place that would be able to have this sort of salvage and shipyard and stuff. I think it could be either one, basically. So in this case, I'm just going to randomly determine between just those two options. So I'm going to flip a coin, basically. I'm going to roll a D2. And on odd, I'm going to have this be in the Terminus. On even, it's going to be in the Outlands. I guess the other way to do this would be to ask the Oracle on 50-50, is it in one or the other? But whatever, I've already got it typed out. We're rolling a D2. So odd, it's the Terminus, and we get... It is, I got a 1 on that D2, so we are finally going to be in the Terminus. So this is the first route that brings us closer in. This is, in my game anyway, the idea is that the Terminus is really where the Imperium has much more of a heavy presence. I figure by the time you're in the Outlands, they're not really patrolling you. Like if you did something really bad inside the Terminus, they might pursue you into the Outlands, but you're not really and maybe every once in a while you might find the Imperium kind of going out there to exert some kind of authority, but it's much, much lighter. This is where we're going to see them again. Law and order really has a presence here. And to be clear, because I often make Star Wars comparisons in this game because I grew up on Star Wars, and that's just a big association I have with kind of all kinds of sci-fi concepts. We do have this sort of galactic empire here called the Imperium. I have not yet officially thought of them in my mind as explicitly just like corrupt and evil. Like when I talk about enforcing law and order and everything, don't inherently picture just like fleets of stormtroopers and everything like that. I don't think it's quite that case. Even though we've seen them we've talked about the Imperium in like opposition to the Vault Hunters and how they're outlaws. I think there's definitely an element of like arguments can be made. I don't think they're explicitly evil, but I do think they're very controlling and particular. You know, everything is very regimented and procedural. they have a way that, like, to live within the protections provided by the Imperium, which I think are largely just out of kind of like maintaining a civilization. I see in this game the Imperium being basically like the one culture. Like everything is inside the Imperium. Like it is truly a galactic empire. And having that level of like a society, a working society across different sectors and everything, it requires a kind of, at least to them, it requires a kind of monoculture and control and subjecting yourself to their rules. And they will enforce those rules. But from their mind, it's definitely legitimately about keeping people protected. You know, the one major thing we know about the Imperium is the idea that they have forbidden the idea of vault hunting. They have, at least implicitly, based on what I've said, hidden any knowledge of where these vaults are. They've probably destroyed information and old records and stuff. They've made it exceptionally difficult to find these vaults that are well hidden to begin with. They don't even like to talk about them. Like the ideal version is that the people of the society just have better things to think about, and over time, generationally, they just forget that they even exist. They don't want to talk about them at all, and talking about why they're forbidden is talking about them. So we know they have certain rules like that, but I just wanted to make it clear that just because we run into people from the Imperium doesn't mean that, like, we inherently have to act like outlaws or run from, like, we have no reason to necessarily be afraid or consider them immediately like our opposition. Now, a situation depending on the situation, they might be. You know, Emil might indeed find himself on the other side of the law, but it's not like we're the rebels and they're the Imperials. That's the long and short of what I wanted to get across here. But indeed, we're in the terminus, and we might run into stuff like that. So importantly, because we're in the terminus, that means we are going to have 4 settlements here. And I'm just looking ahead a little bit to remind myself how many passages are between them. Okay, it'll be 4 settlements and 3 passages. Whereas before we've had 3 and 2. So we have 4 settlements. We're going to do these one at a time. So first off, let's find out what kind of... What location does this have? Where are we finding this settlement? And this first one is going to be a planet-side one, okay? So clearly we're going to have a planet. Population is in the thousands. All right, first look. Let's roll this a couple of times and we see... All right, so it's got industrial architecture, and it's built within a repurposed ship. I'm going to reroll that second one just because it's a little bit too close to me to... We kind of used that sort of motif inside of Hyperion, where it was like cobbled together out of a lot of different ships. I want something a little bit more different than that. So I'm actually going to take a look at the first look table, because we rolled a 20 on that. What would a 2 be? 2 is just beautiful architecture. I like that in conjunction with it being industrial. That reminds me, it makes me think of just all of the architecture and everything is very functional, and I see it as like the beauty is in the precision. It's like playing a game like Factorio or something, where there are all of these moving parts and synchronization of things that are like, what if this is a settlement that it almost looks kind of like a circuit board, where there's just like all of these power lines and stuff and like packets of information just zipping around in a very visual way, just lighting up all of these blocks, and everything is just like perfectly synchronized, where like all of these features on buildings, I see a lot of the architecture it's not just like stagnant. It's a very kinetic sort of environment where there are all these like lifts going up and down, and even things that are just visual, that are just like artwork ornamentation on the buildings themselves that you see. I feel like some of them move, like there's like moving clocks and even like gargoyle-like features that are just motion. It reminds me of kind of like on like a cuckoo clock, some of the ones that have just like rotating figures and stuff. Let's keep that kind of motif going on a lot here, where everything is very like clockwork. And so when I'm going to kind of write down that detail to keep in mind if this place ever comes up, that like that should be the sort of word that informs how we describe things. So just writing down some things I haven't done yet. Population is in the thousands. Industrial architecture. Beautiful. And then just for my own purposes, like clockwork mechanisms. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of neat. I definitely like that more than just going right back to it's like repurposed ship. Like instead it's more, this one is more like a combination of a circuit board and a cuckoo clock. So far, when I imagine this one is going to be kind of like living in Tron, maybe, where there's just a lot of. Oh, and I guess I do need to make sure that it captures enough of the industry when we describe that. You know, like it's not just that the architecture is beautiful and moving, but things serve purposes. So like those moving parts and elevators and lifts and stuff, and things going around and being carried from building to building are probably just things being shipped around, materials that need to get from point A to point B. There's probably a lot in the way of like vacuum tubes and stuff just connecting the city, especially as I like that in the idea of like we have kind of futurism and real retro technology with the idea of things being moved around through vacuum tubes. And yeah, so it's almost like Futurama-like in that way. Cool. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Initial contact. I guess I don't really know that yet. Well, you know what? I feel like I'm more willing to roll more things about these settlements beforehand because it's in the terminus. You know, we left some things more to be determined when we got there, when we were in the Outlands, because things weren't as well known about. But I want to say that terminus locations, like, they're written about. They're well established. These are in the same way that, like, I know certain things about Philadelphia, even having not been there. We're not starting from zero with these locations. So let's actually roll on all of the tables. So with that in mind, the next one is initial contact. So how are they known to be? Unresponsive. That's a very interesting one. Because everything about what I just described suggests, like, you know, kineticism, life, things happening, industry. It's very opposite of the idea of anything being unresponsive and stagnant. So we have all of these remnants of a society that was very efficient and beautiful in its efficiency. And I feel like now it's all just shut down. Now, I want to think more on why that might be, and if it's that they're truly, that like the whole society is shut down, or that they're just not responding to, like literally unresponsive, like they won't talk to outside hails and stuff like that. And to get an idea of what might color that a little bit more, let's roll their authority, and we get fair. All right. Perhaps in its heyday, they even kind of prized on a sort of everything would be balanced and just. And this is perhaps a place that has very complicated sort of algorithms to ensure that like every person gets kind of what is their due. That you have your, I think this is probably the closest we would get to more of like a communist kind of situation here, where you have your allotments of X, Y, and Z for this time period, and perhaps that's part of why it's all with this kind of efficient clockwork sort of, everything can run that efficiently because it's all very set of like who gets what when, and at least in their mind, everybody is treated fairly. But they're not currently responsive. Now that might actually be, with that in mind, when I think about it from that lens of kind of an efficient sort of communist sort of settlement, where everybody gets their lot at appropriate times. Perhaps their unresponsiveness is more, it's not that they aren't working anymore, it's that they want to be unadulterated, right? Like perhaps this society has a very specific means of allowing people in. Like there's an immigration process, basically. And I think maybe the way it works is that you don't directly speak from the outside to anybody on the planet. I'm going to start writing these notes down. If you want to join this colony, there are like emissaries out on other planets. There's kind of like immigration officers in different places that will talk to you and vet you and go through the process to see if you'd be a good fit for their society. And if you are, they will work with you to move yourself and maybe your family and everything onto the planet. But part of the idea, like maybe this is even an experiment. Like this is, yeah, I like this idea. So the Imperium is running an experiment with this planet. This is like their Epcot. This is their envisioning of like a perfect society. And in order for that experiment to work, they need it to not have interference from the outside. So they are running this as kind of a prototype planet to see like, could this sort of thing work? Should it be put onto other places? But this is their first planet where they are testing out, can we make a perfectly regimented and like, scientifically precise society that run, and how will that run? Will the people take to it? Will there be problems with it? That's why they're unresponsive. So let me write down some of those notes. This is like their Epcot. This planet is an Imperium experiment. It's kind of like how, they're doing some test to simulate the idea of what it might be like to live on Mars and like be all alone and everything. And this is their project to see, is this viable in other places? First of its kind. It's a pilot program for other planets potentially. But they've already got thousands of people there, which is kind of cool to me. They've clearly got a lot of buy-in. Perhaps this has scaled up over time, and they have now gotten to the point where it's like, okay, we had it working for a bit. Can this scale to the size of some of our like medium-sized settlements? Because settlements, particularly in the Terminus, definitely get bigger, but thousands is like a reasonable amount of people. All right, as we move down this list, we get onto settlement projects. We're going to roll 2 of these and see, in this place, which we don't know what kind of planet or anything. Actually, yeah, before we get to that, I'm going to kind of go back a little bit and determine, let's roll the type of planet. Let's find out a little bit more about what this place is where they've started up this program. Because that might inform a little bit more about the types of projects they're doing and why. Like if these projects have to do with dealing with the planet, that's one thing. And if the planet is already a very viable place, that's another. So, all right. Our planet is an ocean world. It's funny. I was just talking with some people last night about Waterworld, and that's bringing me right back to it. So it's an ocean planet whose name is Eldoris. Okay. See, now with all of these things working together of like this beautiful industrial architecture and isolated community on an ocean world, it's really making me think of BioShock right now. And I'm just like, are we going to have our first settlement that is under the water? And is that the experiment? Is it about if that can be viable? Are we about to have Rapture here? And for the sake of doing something different, like that is well-explored territory in BioShock, and I don't want to risk like retreading that too much. I think I'm going to say this. I think most of the settlement is above the water, but there's definitely some undersea components to it. There are things that go down deep. There's all kinds of, well, we'll find out a little bit more about what they might be doing when I roll more about their projects. Let's do that. So we're going to say it's a little bit of both. There's stuff up top, there's stuff down below the water. So our first project wants us to roll action and theme. I'll do that after I roll the second project. Okay, so our projects that we have. Trade. That's one of them. That's interesting. If we're describing this place as being very isolationist by design to like not be, if they're not supposed to be messed with from the outside, what is the trade happening between? I mean, I guess it could be trade between like the surface and undersea. Like there might be, the trade might be about bringing stuff from down below up above and vice versa. I do kind of like the idea of finding like how would trade with other settlements work when you're isolationist. I mean, you could certainly have shipments that go kind of out as you bring people in, but you wouldn't know what they want or anything like that. That doesn't seem like it would be the main project. So yeah, I think the trade is likely going to be more between like different aspects of this settlement and making that a viable thing to do. But that'll be colored a little bit when we roll action and theme. So we got acquire and possession, which once again, that does a lot of pointing towards the idea of like, it kind of goes hand in hand with trade. And since trade is all about who has what, and acquire and possession are also about getting a particular kind of thing. And just for the appropriate visual of it all, like I feel like something way down in the deep would be appropriate for if there's like one particular almost like artifact sort of thing that would be way down deep. Now, another way to interpret this, of course, this whole society, despite being so completely like, vetted for the right kinds of people and very exacting in how, like, who gets what, how everything plays out, it's clockwork. That doesn't mean that literally everybody is up to the same sort of things. So perhaps there are some people in there who kind of go against the grain. Just throwing this out here, but what if there were some people, let's just say vault hunters, because they're not really friends with the Imperium. There might be some vault hunters that found out that there is a crucial key deep in the oceans to understanding and decoding a component of finding this one particular vault. And it's deep down in the oceans of Eldoris. And so they're like undercover here. They have a couple of people who have done what they could to pass all of the tests and everything and be allowed on this planet. And they have to find time to, they have a very specific schedule of what they're supposed to do when in this sort of very controlled society. But during their free time, they have to find ways to make progress on getting this possession. And of course, they're kind of on their own here because there's no contact to the outside. But I kind of like the idea that it's not just one person doing this. This is enough to be a settlement project. So I see it as, unbeknownst to the Imperium, a not insubstantial amount of Eldoris, a not insubstantial amount of the people of Eldoris are actually allied with the Vault Hunters. Now, you know what? I kind of want to change that a little bit. I like the base idea, but I don't want everything to just be Imperium versus Vault Hunters. It's a little too simple to me. And also, I feel like Vault Hunter crews are relatively small. And so I don't see enough of them working together to be like a substantial part of a population in the thousands. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. This should be perhaps another faction. And with that in mind, we have faction oracles. So let's find out about this other faction. Faction type, we have... it's a guild. A guild of peacekeepers. Okay. They're called the Exalted Court. Their influence is notable. That definitely makes sense for being able to have a pretty sizable population here. They've got a decent amount of influence here. I mean, it's not the top. Beyond notable, there's dominant and then inescapable. And I feel like Imperium would be dominant. I don't know if there is anything that is inescapable amount of influence yet. Because you literally can't escape the influence of the Imperium by going out to the Outlands. So I don't think that exists. So, like, notable is almost at the very top of what's even possible in this game. So this is a major faction. These peacekeepers, the Exalted Court. Okay. The faction project for them is subsume another faction. Okay. That could be interesting. I'm not yet sure what that would be. I mean, if they're that notable and kind of disrupting an Imperium project here, it sounds like they're working to make a play on being the new sort of galactic government. And perhaps since they are like a guild of peacekeepers, they might see the Imperium as being a little bit too militaristic with the people that go against their rules. This group perhaps is a little bit more laissez-faire with it all. Thinks that this is too tight of a control on things, which would also explain why they're trying to disrupt a place that's literally like clockwork levels of control over people. And it would make a lot of sense if they were to try and disrupt this project, because if this is a pilot program, I imagine this guild, the Exalted Court, is definitely not ready to take over. They don't have as much influence as the Imperium, but they certainly don't want the Imperium to have more of a stranglehold on the people by having a program like this succeed. So they're in it to make sure this does not spread to other places. So they've gotten a bunch of people onto this planet, and they are probably also aware of some manner of thing to acquire here deep beneath the ocean depths that would help their agenda to become the dominant power in the galaxy, and eventually I think they've got a long view on this. Nobody is really expecting to be able to do this soon, but they're like hoping to slowly roll up and eventually be able to take over the course of probably generations. And there's something beneath the waves here that'll help them do that. At the very least, they're convinced of that. Now, one of their quirks is they have an ancient or coded language. I mean, the first thought I have when I hear ancient or coded language, it makes me think of the sorts of mysteries involved with the vaults, but I don't want this to all tie back to that. I kind of want this to be its own separate thing. So these are people that are still otherwise... Okay. By the way, I do apologize if it ever gets annoying the way I'll like half say a thought and then stop and then say something completely different while I'm thinking. Let me know if that ever gets hard to follow, and I'll try my best to stop doing that. I've been trying to do it less actively, but sometimes I catch myself in that sort of mannerism, and I know you can't read my thoughts, and so I try to do it as little as possible. Anyway, I was thinking during that gap that maybe if we think about the sort of core assumptions of Starforged, a lot of the world building is based off the idea that, you know, we have gotten to this galaxy from somewhere else. We're refugees, sort of, from another place. There are kind of different versions of that. But we had a life before this area. And this ancient encoded language, I feel like might come from the before life. Like, this is a group that has held on to the way we used to speak, the language that existed, or at least a language that existed in the old ways from the other galaxy where we originally came from. They've held on to it all this time. Whereas I think the Imperium is sort of, they've gotten everything down to one universal language for all the people in the Imperium. Like, everybody here speaks the same language. And I'm sure that this faction, you know, the Exalted Court does speak that language too. But unlike pretty much everybody else who has forgotten kind of the old ways, and the many other languages died and were forgotten over time, they've been keeping up one of theirs from before. So I don't think it's like a special language. It's not like a magic language or anything like that. It's just noteworthy that they've refused to forget their culture and language from before. So this is probably like one particular culture that has held on and been like, no, we don't want everybody to be the same. Perhaps that's part of their like quirks as well, and just ideology and beliefs is, it's not that they're full on anarchists or something like that and like, you know, no authority. It's not that, but they do think the Imperium has taken it too far, and that trying to make everybody into a full on monoculture is getting rid of so much of the beauty of possibility. And maybe that's the sort of thing they're looking for. Like, what if what they're trying to acquire somehow relates back to the old ways and like some lost culture? Like, yeah, like what if Eldoris, it wasn't always this pilot planet for this program. Perhaps people used to live here shortly after everybody moved into this galaxy, into the terminus. And so in the beginning, of course, people had all these different cultures and languages and stuff, and over time, the Imperium solidified it into more of a monoculture, and things were forgotten and all of that. But the Exalted Court knows that there is, like, evidence of this other language and, like, fascinating other culture. They're beneath the waves here. Something is forgotten down below. And if they can acquire that, they can learn more about other things that were lost and more about the history of how that happened. Because perhaps they also have a suspicion that not all of the Imperium's ability to make this into a monoculture was like the friendliest way. And so maybe they're looking for it for more of a historical perspective of what exactly happened here. Cool. I think we've got a little bit more of a decent idea of what's going on here. I do still want to roll faction rumors for the Exalted Court, and we have preparing a major offensive or operation. I do think that's indeed more rumor than, like, I don't know how true it is or not, but I think what that represents is that people are always talking about how, like, this is, like, it's not a secret organization. People know about the Exalted Court. And, like, I don't think they're very quiet about what they want or, like, what they think is wrong with the Imperium, and talking about these things that were lost for the sake of what we have now, and is it all worth it? Like, they're very vocal about it all. And so I think people are always rumoring that they're just like a moment away, like one of these days, because they've gotten very influential and powerful. Like, they've gotten a lot of people sort of to their cause. There are always rumors that they're about to do some major strike on the Imperium. They're about to try and take over, that, it's just around the corner. It's kind of like how, the big one, I live in California, and the big one, the giant earthquake, it's always, we're always due for it. It's always coming. And it's not that that's wholly untrue, but it's not specific to this moment exactly. I think that's how I interpret that rumor. People are just always talking about them as if it's about to, it could be any day now. All right, this is pretty neat. I am going to make a note about that on Eldoris, that the Exalted Court has a clandestine presence here. Now that presence is indeed, it is secret there. That project, I don't think that relates to the rumor. I don't think people have any idea that they've got a presence here on Eldoris, largely. When people talk about them preparing for a major offensive or operation, it's not this. But they do indeed have an operation here to try and disrupt we still don't have the settlement name, but they're trying to disrupt that and still further their own agenda. I think perhaps the exfiltration idea is that if they can ever get this place to full on fail and just bring it down, that eventually the Imperium will call it off and everybody will be exfiltrated and brought back to their own individual homes. Or maybe it's something, I don't know. If we see this place, we might explore that more, but they have a clandestine presence here. They're trying to stop it from being successful as a project. Also looking for evidence under the waters of the society that was here before. Okay. Back to Eldoris itself. Settlement trouble. What's going on here? Well, what are the problems? Battle for leadership. Well, that definitely makes a kind of sense from what I've been talking about. Now, I do think that when we talk about settlement trouble, I don't think it's just chaos around this trouble or anything like that. I think it's just, in this case, more about what's going on right now. So when I read those words of battle for leadership, I don't think that's a violent battle for it. More that there are elections going on. This is a long-term project. There definitely is still part of the process of this project is still involving authority and leadership and everything. And I don't know exactly what it looks like. I don't know if this is full. I doubt it's fully a democratic process, but there's still a process to determining who is in charge on this planet itself. There's a proper way to do that. And right now, there's a battle for that leadership. Different people want the positions of power here. And that might not even be I actually doubt that has anything to do with the Exalted Court. Because they're trying to stay secretive, right? They don't want their presence to be known. They're not looking to just overthrow this place that way. Not yet, anyway. I think that battle for leadership actually comes from within the legitimate parties who are here trying to make this experiment work. They just have some differing views over who should actually be on top and maybe sniping at each other. Everybody wants to be the official person in charge here who gets all the kickbacks and everything. I don't imagine the society is working perfectly. There's corruption. There's the authority is fair. It's not corrupt. I don't mean corruption in that sense. It's not that bad, or I guess it's in that sense, but it's not that bad. It's not widespread corruption, but it's not a perfect system. And so there may be a little bit of some stuff going on for who exactly is in charge of this place. All right, let's get a settlement name. Sanctity. I actually think that's really fitting for the idea of trying to make a perfect society. Okay, I got to organize my notes a little bit here because I've written a lot of this as... Some of this is planet stuff and some of it is settlement stuff. So Eldoris is the planet, but Sanctity... Sanctity is the name of the actual settlement on it. Okay, now for a little bit about the planet itself. We know it's an ocean world called Eldoris. All right, so details about this place. All right, the atmosphere it's got is marginal. All right, so could definitely be doing better, but there's you can go outside, you can breathe, but you probably don't want to do that without any help for long. But also, if a lot of this goes underwater, they probably have all kinds of systems in place for oxygen, and like, it's supplemented in all kinds of ways. There are probably lots of sealed platforms, and we talked about vacuum tubes and stuff. Like, you don't necessarily have to be exposed to the atmosphere that often when you are on Eldoris. I think you can, if you need to go outside, that's not like inherently just immediately going to kill you, but a lot of the time the structures are all made for it. So okay, it's got a marginal atmosphere. Observe from space. Let's see. All right, we've got emerging volcanoes, which is pretty cool. I actually kind of like the idea that some of those might be a like man-made sort of thing where they're actively trying to make more land masses by getting these erupting volcanoes far away from the main settlement to make new landforms and like new places to be able to build like different kinds of outposts and stuff. Like that's perhaps one of the projects that happens in the background, working on making new landforms. So we have emerging volcanoes. We also have scattered islands, and that makes sense. These are all connected together. The scattered islands are some of these like provoking volcanoes to emerge and like working on getting them to erupt. And over time, they've been marginally successful. They're getting there, but a long way to go. They're nowhere near having like, these islands are tiny. The amount that actually sticks above the water. Life. None. I mean, that would have to be outside of the people living on the settlements, obviously, but that's interesting, actually. Maybe that's a big part of the experiment, is like, how well can you make a society that survives, like a functioning, pretty sizable settlement where 0% of the food comes from elsewhere, like you're not trading with anybody, it's completely locked off, and 0% of the food comes from life on the planet. That doesn't exist either. It all has to come from within. It all has to be just created through energy, and like things have to be converted into an edible form entirely from within. That would make a lot of sense as something that they're trying to test and see, like, can that be viable? It may not even be a matter of like everybody has to live like this, but perhaps this is a pilot program to help expand more outside of the terminus and onto new planets that are less viable. Maybe in the terminus, they're starting to run into issues where things in some places are feeling a little bit crowded, and they want to be able to bring people to new planets. Now, it's hard for me to think of it that way when a lot of these populations are only in the thousands, and, we know certainly our planet has billions of people, and we've never seen anything near that size yet, so maybe it's not an overcrowding thing, but still just, there are planets where you could get some great resources, but it would involve staying there for a long time, and there's nothing to eat. Like, there's no viable way to live on that planet. And so with this place having a marginal atmosphere and having to work entirely on its own with no food sources, this is a good pilot program for dealing with several types of troubles you might find on non-viable planets. And they're seeing if maybe there's a way to make it work. So yeah, actually, I like that there's no life here. It's weird, given that it's a full-on ocean world, that they're not even like microbial life or anything. Maybe like microbial. I guess this game might not mean that level on life, but there are no fish, no mammals, nothing like that, no birds, no real sizable, noteworthy life. I'm going to say there's got to be some amount of microbial stuff, but they're not even making like algae or anything here. It is so early on. No life has been able to exist on this planet. It probably could someday, but it's not there yet. So, all right. Let's get planet-side features. So I suppose it occurs... I got emerging volcanoes on observed from space, so some of those have got to be pretty big, if you can see them from space. And the island, so fine. There are various islands and stuff, but they're not populated yet. And they are still trying to make more of them. Or maybe that's even just talked about, like, as a possible thing they could do. Because we know that's not, like... We haven't talked about that as part of their project. That's not like trade or the acquire possession thing. I don't know. There's also unrelenting rainfall, so this is like Camino at this point. And I rolled for another feature, living islands, which doesn't make any sense if there's no life here. And I'm not currently looking to make that make sense, so let's do a different one. Windborne water spouts. So the water gets everywhere, but you know, it's outside, it's still outside of all of these sealed tubes and everything. All of these glass and clear walkways are constantly just being like drenched. I like the idea that you probably can't see outside them very well at all because they are just so soaked in unrelenting rainfall and water spouts and stuff. It just looks like you're going through a car wash all the time. So there's probably a lot of people, they don't want to go outside, which may be a good thing or maybe a bad thing. There may be some kind of stir craziness that happens from just being so cooped up and not able to see the world outside of this society. Yeah. I could roll more, but I think I've got enough for this place. We got several more settlements to make, so let's keep it at that. So that's Eldoris with the settlement of Sanctity on it. I'm going to add that to my map. Whew, okay. That took a little bit longer than I was realizing because I got into the weeds on all kinds of things, including faction oracles and everything, but I felt it was kind of necessary for what we were discovering on Eldoris. Okay, so our next settlement type is... There's another planet-side one, so we're going to need yet another planet. This time, so as to not kind of leave it off by the wayside and forget about it, I'm indeed going to just do all the planet stuff first, and then we will do the settlement. So planet, all the planet oracles. Type of planet first we have is an ice world. Okay. This one's an ice world. Its name is Taiga. All right. So Taiga, the ice world, we have its atmosphere is ideal. Observed from space, it's got some frozen oceans. And it also has some frozen oceans. Let's roll that again. It also has some sky-breaching geysers. Now for settlements, I rolled settlements in conflict. So perhaps we actually have a couple of different settlements on Taiga. That'll be, yeah, we'll make 2 for this place. That'll be neat. All right, life, we have scarce, but it's got some. It's got more than Eldoris does. Planet side feature. And rolls a couple of times. Shattered plains of pack ice and abyssal ice fissures. So, yeah, right now, what that's telling me is basically like, you know that picture you have in your mind of, like Antarctica? It's that. It's trying to go to the South Pole here. It's everything you've ever imagined when you hear the words ice planet. I suppose we didn't really get a lot in the way of ice fissures on a place like Hoth. That was really just all snow. So this isn't our Hoth. This is our Antarctica. This is our, like, the really dangerous parts of going up Everest. Where I feel like those fissures indeed, like real ones, like they could open up without really a lot of warning. And so there are certain regions of this planet that are super dangerous to cross. And it really controls what sorts of paths. I like the idea that since there are multiple settlements here, a big part of the currency of this planet is the known safe paths to travel here. Like this is a planet that could definitely make use of like exploration, like a full undertaken expedition on the planet itself. We've only ever done it to go from planet to planet or settlement to settlement and all that. You could definitely do that on this planet because there are known set routes that'll allow you, and like trying to just forge your own trail has all kinds of icy dangers like that, where you're really rolling some dice, and so that allows certain people to really control convenient routes and perhaps have their own tolls and stuff like that. Yeah, and so we have settlements in conflict. Cool. I'm going to roll... We've got this like peril and opportunity for planets with life and planets without life. I'm going to, just to get a better sense of this place, and like, yeah, you control these routes, but for what purpose? I want to roll the opportunity here. I've got a decent idea of perils on this place, though I'll probably do both. Yeah, screw it. Let's just do both. So one peril of this place that's noteworthy is drastic environmental change. So that reads to me like what I was talking about, where it can look like a safe path at first, but then the fissure opens up. Like, things can happen in a very surprising way. I think it's not only ice fissures opening up and swallowing you in that way and like falling hundreds of feet down below and really not being able to get back out. I think there are also just storms that can happen very, like, without a lot of warning. You can be caught up in utter blizzards. I think, yeah, it's just the unpredictability of the environment makes it very treacherous to travel here. And so for an example of an opportunity here, though, abandoned camp or vehicle. So that reads to me like a big crashed ship or something that's just ripe for salvage. Like there's so much to take from it that even though people are constantly picking it over, there's just so much left because it's such a huge ship. And so yeah, that's like a big reason why people cross this treacherous area is to try and go back and forth on this. All right, so that's the stuff we need to know about Taiga, the planet itself. Now let's come up with 2 settlements for this place. Once I add it to my little map here. Okay. So we have a planet. We're going to make 2 planet-side settlements. This first one is going to be called Sigil. And it has a population, just going down the list here, it has a population of hundreds. I like that. I like the idea that because this is a very hostile sort of environment, these would be relatively small populations here. Certainly relative to what we saw in Eldoris. We're not talking starship crew levels. It's not that low. But these are definitely, like, these are smaller groups. So I like hundreds for this sort of place. It makes sense to me and how I was kind of visualizing the types of people and communities that would be here. Let's get a couple of first looks. Temporary or seasonal location, and obvious social stratification. Now, taking these one at a time, temporary or seasonal location, what that says to me is that perhaps this is a settlement that has not had a lot of great ability to deal with the changing environment of Taiga. You know, how things, they'll think they're in a safe spot. What that says to me is perhaps this is a group that fully believes that Taiga, no one place will ever be safe enough to just settle down and have permanent buildings. That they're always looking out for the signs that trouble is a-coming, that the planet is going to fight them more, and their whole society is built around being able to pack up and leave and get out of the way of that problem as quickly as possible. So I see this as very much like more on a level of like a tent society. This is a very migratory settlement. So they're never in any one place for too long. They try and keep ahead of the signs. That's probably a big focus that they have is environmental prediction so that they can just stay alive. Now, obvious social stratification is interesting to me. So what are the like classes that we have here? Certainly a classic would be, you know, your working class versus your rich elite. But I want to see if I can come up with something a little bit more nuanced than that. Let's put a little bit more of a sci-fi spin on this. Make it a little bit weirder, shall we not? So in order to get some ideas on that, I'm going to randomly roll on the character roll table. This is going to come up with a type of person in this society that I'm going to artificially say, like, this person is really prized here. They are held up above other people in society, people that are like this. And that role is artisan, which makes me think of, like, you know, in an environment like this, you know, what kind of arts would be done? And my immediate thought when I read that word was, what about like ice sculptors? If they have these sorts of temporary structures, maybe it's not that they're tents and stuff, but they're making kind of more like an igloo sort of solution where they're making these settlements out of ice as quickly as possible. And so there is a class of people here that are the ice sculptors that can do that especially well and quickly, and we need those people. And in this place, even though they're like the working class, they are held up so high as being so essential that I think they can like hold their head up high in society. Like the celebrities of this place are the builders, because they're just so vital to this place being able to work, to not leave everybody out in the cold for too long when they have to pack up their stuff. Because I don't know if they like destroy their buildings or anything. So like pockmarked all around this planet are like old settlements that are maybe a little bit broken up from windstorms and stuff that happened. But you can see remnants of their old sculpted buildings, and they just move on to another place and sculpt new ones. And I think they do it through different methods. There are some people that probably like blast it away with laser rifles in just the right way. And some people that do it just by hand and chisels and stuff. And some people that maybe even do it more like psionically and like making fire. Like they kind of, or even mundane fire and just melt their way in. There's like a lot of different ways that people do it, which lead to different types of buildings. But those who can build especially efficiently are, they are held up high in this society. They're given all the best food. That like they do everything they can in this place to make sure like those people don't die out quicker than anybody else, because without them everybody dies. And I think when times are good, like they're not constantly moving. There are times where you get to stay in one place for a while, and so when they don't need to be building up just the base structure, I think they are otherwise just artisanally making things out of ice, like more handheld, crafty projects and stuff. Or at least some of them are doing this. And I think it is expected that like people just like buy these little trinkets and like ice totems and stuff off of them out of like a sign of respect. I almost see it as like, I'm thinking about like paying homage to like shrines of different Greek gods and stuff, where carrying a certain builder's totem on you is your way of like you're kind of expected to do, if your home was made by one of these particular people, it's kind of like expected that you carry one of their totems on you and keep up with all the latest ones. And you probably sacrifice some portion of your meals. Like you are responsible for feeding them. Yeah. How about that? Like, the builders, even if they're not actively building, they don't have to do shit anymore. Like, they are fed off of everybody else's labor, because the expectation is when we have to move, they're going to get to work and keep us all alive. But when we're not moving, they don't have to lift a finger, other than whatever like art projects they want to do through ice carving. And so that suggests to me that they've got a great incentive that they may have a little bit of friction between them and some of the people that are predicting that we have to move, because not everybody knows that. Like, somebody's got to be the one that officially says this settlement has to move. And if you're an ice carver, that's when you have to work, when we have to move. So that sucks. You probably have a lot of doubt about like, do we really have to? Is it really going to be that apocalyptic? Because they probably move ahead of it ever happening. So you don't get a lot of confirmation on, was that really necessary? So you probably get a little bit of friction between them and some of the leadership that officially declare we have to move. And okay, I'm going to make a little bit of a note about that. So stratification, ice carvers held in highest positions, ice carvers held in highest esteem. People, they don't have to do any work once settlement is settled. Cared for by they probably call it their tenants. We'll call it that way. So it's not, that's kind of like the rent they pay. Yeah, like the ice carvers are like the landlords because they made all the buildings. And so everybody who lives in them, they pay their homage to their builder. Okay. So that's some first look stuff. Initial contact. Neutral / automated. I'm going to say that's more just a neutral thing. What we've established so far doesn't sound like it would work really well with automation. They seem to be much more live off the land. This is not the Tron type settlement that we had on Eldoris. This is far more just migratory and just ice houses. So yeah, they're neutral. They might like you, they might not. They're not. I think they probably just don't have a very strong reputation of how they deal with outsiders. It's just, it depends. Depends what you want from them. And also depends on when are you talking to them. Are they in the middle of trying to move to a new place? Their authority is tolerant. Okay. Probably because it's such hard living there that they're very accepting of the fact that, like, shit happens. You know, like, people have bad days. I like the idea. There's probably not a lot of like hard stance on crime. They probably don't have a lot in the way of definitions of crime here. Outside of like, we are still in the terminus, so the Imperium rules do apply, but to an extent. Like I think they're too hard scrabble just trying to live here to worry too much about like there's no such word as like misdemeanor. I mean, they speak the same language as everybody else, but they don't really worry about the concept of misdemeanors here. It's all just, did you kill somebody? No? Okay, well, everybody just move on and be cool about it. They try and just settle things reasonably. I feel like there are judges here in like in a very original meaning of that. Like it really is, it's like they may even judge things kind of more by committee, where if grievances come up, they get like a quorum of people that are different at different times and determine what's to be done about this problem. It's very community focused. Yeah, perhaps there's no one just like the leader or anything, which perhaps is all the more why the decision about moving or not can be a little bit more problematic. Like, not everybody will necessarily agree all the time, but there will be committees formed on whether or not they should move based on, like, if somebody brings up a potential trouble, a committee is formed, it's talked over, and that committee decides, do we move or not? And sometimes you might have kind of dumb people on the committee. Like some people will be experts and some people won't. And maybe there are times where the builders are like, we didn't really have to move. This is some bullshit. And people might even agree, but everybody has accepted, like, this is the fair way to do it. We go with whatever that committee says. All right. Yeah, I kind of like that idea for this place as well. I'm going to make that as a note here. Many decisions made by committee. By random committee. Now, of course, who determines who's random? Like, there's always room to put a thumb on the scale here, but as the broad strokes of how this works, that's how it works. So the authority is tolerant. Now, let's get a couple of settlement projects. Secrecy, interesting. And pacifism. Well, my most initial thought when it came from secrecy does not line up that well with pacifism, so let's make this work a little bit, because I was thinking about how, we're going to have a second settlement on this planet, and we already know that there are settlements in conflict here. Now, they're clearly not at... Well, I guess maybe they are at war, and that's the reason why pacifism is a project, because it's everybody... A lot of people seem to think that this is a waste of everybody's resources to focus on warring with this other settlement. We really need to find peace. So yeah, that makes sense. Pacifism is a project because they don't have peace right now, but they need to find it. Now, as far as secrecy then, I guess they could go hand in hand if it were a matter of like, the only way to have peace is just for these people to not know where we are. I've gotten the impression in the way I think about it that the reason why they're in conflict with the other settlement and at this point full on in war, it's got to be like a territory thing, right? Like they've got, I mean, I guess it's got to be one of two things. It's either territory of like they're trying to migrate into an area that the other settlement is already like they consider theirs, or it has to do with control over salvage of that wrecked ship or a route to get there or something like that. It could be a matter of like they settled somewhere that's on some prominent figure's route, a safe route to get to the ship, and that's its own big problem. And okay, so secrecy. I don't know that I want it to just be they just go to somewhere else and then now the other settlement doesn't know where they are and war can end. That just seems too simple to me. Because they're so migratory, like, why wouldn't they do that? So I want the secrecy to be about something else, something entirely unrelated to the war between the settlements. Okay, what about this? What if we talked about how they move from place to place and they leave all of their old buildings behind. All the old sculptures are still out there. Maybe there's a reason that's a problem. And one of the projects is to have certain people go out to old settlements and kind of clean up after them. So like, maybe there's not a whole like series of breadcrumbs of old settlements, but a few that they've had to leave behind that they need to send certain experts out to like remove evidence that they were there. Now, why would they need to do that? You wouldn't want to demonstrate that you were ever somewhere if, for whatever reason, you weren't allowed to be there. If some greater authority had a problem with that. And it could be something that, like, could run in conflict with the Imperium, maybe. It could even be beyond, like, a problem with this other settlement, but a problem with, like, the galactic government. Oh, you know what would be so dumb and, like, a shitty thing? I'm spitballing this because I thought of it, but this may go too far and, like, the Imperium is just evil. But I was thinking about, like, what if, technically speaking, those buildings still exist for, like, tax purposes? And, like, if they don't get rid of all of the old buildings, they'll just owe a fuckload of taxes when the Imperium comes by to collect that. Like, they have to pay for all of those things, and it's dumb, but they have to go destroy them so that they don't just have a huge tax burden. I don't know that I like that idea, but I wanted to at least get it out there. It's like, maybe that's why you have to destroy your old buildings, is you don't want to keep paying taxes on them. Yeah, I don't know that I want the Imperium to be... Actually, I don't know. Like, I'm changing my mind on that. Maybe we will have that. And it's not that the Imperium is that evil. It's that they have so many things to do. This is something that, like, slipped through the cracks, where it's like an automated system thing. It's not that a reasonable person is saying, like, well, all those buildings also count for taxes, so pony up. It's not that. It's that there's an automated system that scans the planet from orbit or whatever, and if they don't do this, and it's a dangerous mission to have to do, you have, again, you're crossing these, you have to have, like, you have to cross this dangerous planet to go back and destroy stuff when there wasn't time in the past. But they have a project right now, which is the recognition that, like, the next orbital scan that's going to automatically send them a bill, and, like, what they're going to owe, they won't be able to pay it. Like, somebody finally realized why they're struggling so long, and, like, why it's kind of like they didn't realize that they never canceled their Netflix subscription. They have this old subscription service with all of these old buildings that they pay taxes on, and somebody finally looked through the books and realized, wait, we're paying how much for what? And so they've got all of these old settlements left behind, and they realized they could be saving a fortune, which would help fund their effort in this war effort, or just as a society, maybe be able to build up structures that could last longer, or just whatever they need the resources for. They're just throwing so much of it away because of this error, and perhaps there are people that are trying to work with the Imperium to alert them to how, like, this is a problem and, like, it's a bug in the system. Like, clearly this is not intended behavior, but they've gotten no responses so far. It hasn't gotten through the bureaucracy. And so the easiest way, it's just like, it would just be faster to just destroy all this shit before the scan happens. So that's one of their projects, is destroy old buildings for tax purposes. So that's one of their projects, is destroy old buildings for tax purposes. Gonna make some notes on that. So, destroy old buildings for tax purposes, and find a way to make peace with other settlement, which I'd give a name, but we don't know what they are yet. All right, so that's those are their big projects right now. Their trouble: preyed upon by raiders. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I think in this case, it's not like another faction, but the raiders in this case are just like the vanguard of whatever army. Like, there's a lot of skirmishes and stuff. Right now, there's a war happening between these two settlements. So yeah, every once in a while, raiders come through. That makes complete sense. All right. So that's everything we need to know about Sigil. We need to make the other settlement on this planet. However, I look over and I see I've clearly been really taking my time with this one. I think I'm going to have to extend this into a part 2. So, I hope you've been enjoying this process. We have 2 more settlements to make, and then finishing out the sector with, like, a sector trouble and putting all the stuff between it. Most of this will just be the sector stuff, but I think I'm going to have to extend this into next time. So let's do this the official way. As for what that additional settlement is on Taiga, well, that's a question for next time. All right, see y'all next week.